All right. Well, that's fine. We can do that if you'd like.
Well, you know what? Since we haven't gone live yet, I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret about
Okay.
everything. And oh, wait a second. Oh my goodness, we're live. No, folks, it's 2024. And that's the first time I say that out loud.
Serious 2024. Man, well, last week was our New Year's episode, and we talked about everything but New Year's. But that's okay. It's all right.
I don't
We
know why
acknowledged it.
why do you
We
retain
we we acknowledged it. Then we moved on, and sometimes that's what you got to do.
but why do you retain certain rules that in reality can just, well, I mean, there is a good reason for it, but I'm sure, and I can think of some now that I'm saying it out loud. Like once I said it out loud, there's actually good reasons in my mind, but I'm going to go with my objection for the hell of it. Why would you retain rules that can easily be tossed out the window and just go frantically down the road in hog wild, what would be a word to fit in there, abandon.
Hedonistic abandon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one simple word: tradition. We had that topic 2 weeks ago.
We had that topic last week. We ended with, oh no, was
Well,
it
no,
two
that
weeks
was two
ago?
weeks ago. That was the pre-Christmas one. Yeah, we talked about. I was kind of my cynical side came out, and I was talking about how the holidays just don't seem to be the same anymore, especially without kids around, young kids around. You know, and we got into traditions and this, that, and the other thing. And so that's why I don't go running down the street at Mach 4 with my hair on fire, because it's tradition not to. It just, we you do a wow, it's been this kind of a year. Then after New Year's, you did a wow, we had this kind of year, and now we're looking forward to this kind of a new year, when it's all just another day that ends with Y. So, you know, it's tradition. There's no reason for it,
Why do birds sing? Um,
because they can't talk.
well, is that is that 100% true?
Yeah.
No, it's not. Can
Yeah,
you
well,
think of one bird?
you're talking about parrots and mynah birds and this, that, and the other. But here's the funny part about it:
Yeah.
parrots and mynah birds out in the wild have never ever been observed mocking or adopting the calls of any other animals. There is one bird that does.
That's, wait a second. I've got a problem with that, but go ahead. Because
There
something
is
just popped into
Okay.
my
Go
head.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. This
No,
is
no, no, you
interesting.
do, because I'm gonna what I'm about to lay on the table is gonna be so earth shattering right now, just with that entering 2024, that we will have to take a 5 year sabbatical in order to recover. No, go ahead, go ahead.
There is one bird in Australia called the uh, supreme lyrebird, and we're talking Lyre because its tail is shaped like a lyre, the instrument. It does adopt other sounds. They have found lyrebirds and recorded lyrebirds out in the wild doing the sound of car alarms, of cameras, of chainsaws. But parrots, mynah birds, they've never been filmed or taped in the wild imitating any other sounds.
Wait a second.
And they don't know why parrots and mynah birds do imitate us when they're raised in captivity. They don't know why.
I feel like everything you just laid out, I mean, not everything, but this bit about never in the wild, I feel that there's something wrong with that, because but I can't outright deny it because I haven't looked into it. This is so nuanced, but I recall somewhere in my back catalog of my like library, in some drawer somewhere, that I have seen a documentary. This is anecdotal as hell,
Mhm.
where in fact in the jungles somewhere in South America, they this at night the sounds they make, other sounds of other creatures and such. I kind of feel like that's true looking in my mind, but I could be having a false memory.
Well, like I said, they've never recorded one doing it. That's not to say it's never happened, but they have it's not been recorded.
Like
So
recorded what? Like are you talking about like
like a parrot imitating a hell, I don't know what other birds are in the area or what other animals. They've not found a mynah bird or a parrot imitating a bear or a lion or a baboon or anything like that.
you've never been in the jungle miles from
No.
home and looked up on a tree and saw a cockatoo sitting there and it said, "Got any beer?"
No, but I have been in a pet shop and that's happened. There's a store here called Blackbird. And Blackbird is where you go to get all your outdoor gear, the fishing stuff, your hunting stuff, your camping gear, the outdoor wear, stuff like that. And their mascot used to be two mynah birds in cages there in this store. One was Pedro and the other was Joe. And they would talk. You walk up, you say, "Hello, Joe." And he'd look at you and go, "What do you want?" That was just his thing. It,
On
but
on a
out in the wild, it's not been recorded yet.
on a scale of 1 not sure
Mm-hmm.
to 10 absolutely this is like there's no way around it. Where do you sit with that statement?
Well,
Because and I don't know because I have not looked into it, but I feel like when you were talking about the store that you were telling it, the first thing that like some little elf went running down the hallways of my but it could be a false memory.
I
So I'm not
heard it.
saying
I heard that presented as a fact on a TV show, and I went, "Wait a minute, what? That can't be right." And I did look into it. Granted, it's been a few years. It's been
so
4 or 5 years.
so give me a rough estimate number
What do you mean?
of
About four or
sure
five years ago.
of surety from 1 to 10.
A scale of 1 to 10, I'd say about 8. I don't know
That's pretty
because
high.
I didn't exhaust it. I'm sure I could go further and further and deeper and deeper. And time has passed since I did that search. Like I said, it's about
Maybe
5 years ago.
maybe since then there's a group of parrots somewhere
Mhm.
in the mountains sitting playing poker saying
Mhm.
pass. Yeah.
Well, and who's to say that that's not happening? But the animal experts, I guess they're ornithologists or ornithologists. I don't remember what you call bird specialists. So let's call them bird specialists. They agree that as far as their research is concerned, as far as they have learned, the birds are just imitating sounds. They may be able to associate meaning with certain things if certain things happen. Like if a bird knows that if it makes the noise that says, "Give me a treat," it's going to get a treat. It will continue to make that noise thinking treats are coming. So it'll continue to make certain sounds if there's a reward, and it'll avoid other sounds if something bad happens. They get put in the cage or the cover goes over the cage or what have you. You know.
In the end, bird brains.
Yeah, bird brains. Exactly. Now, how we got on this, I have no idea, but it's just what it's like in the
See
new
what happens.
year.
You see what happens.
One bird brained idea after the other.
You opened up see what but you see how this works.
Mm-hmm.
You opened up, who knows how we start. We would have to rewind the tape, and now we're in birdland. So I mean, think about it. This is what it is.
Well, let me throw something else into the mix here because I see Jim Dockrell says, "What has changed other than a page on the calendar?" Okay, fair enough. I'll take that at face value because I think you're right. But remember, I told you I had a little micro conversation subject in the background? It's related to what Jim just said. One of the things Linda got from my granddaughter at Christmas was a calendar with a big wall calendar with alpaca pictures. Linda likes alpacas. Okay, great. My first response to that was, they still print calendars? When was the last time you used a printed calendar up on the wall?
I don't even write physically with a pen anymore. I mean, I do, but that's like 3 words where
As a
I
last resort. Yeah. Same here. I
so
really didn't know they still printed calendars. I thought that went the way of the telephone book.
I haven't had a calendar up on the wall since the 90s.
It's been a while. I mean, I jot everything down in here. If it's something real urgent, I've got a notebook right here that I write stuff down in. Or if it's a measurement, I don't want to try to save it or what have you. Um, it's a I don't know. It's one of those things. I guess it's part of the older generational thing. In that, I still have a clock with hands on it and things of that nature.
You're so antiquated.
Yeah, I am.
You're
I'm
like
a
a
I'm a, I'm a
20th.
child of the '60s and '70s. I mean, yeah.
You're like dramatic pause. An antiquated child of the 20th century.
Hmm. Yes, I am,
And
and I'll
so
freely and openly admit it. You
and
betcha.
so is this guy.
But you know what?
And there's nothing wrong about with that.
I agree. Sometimes the old school is the best school.
We're like people from the 1800s ladder rolling over into the 1900s saying these kids today with their
Nah,
automobiles and doohickeys.
not quite.
No,
Kids today with the hair in their clothes. We got nothing but a bunch of hairy, clothes kids.
no, but think about it. It's kind of the equivalent. If we were back doing the changeover from to the 20th to the 21st,
Hmm.
the previous equivalent would have been 1800s into the
Yeah.
1900s.
Tonight I'm gonna party like it's 1899.
It would have been. It just rolls through because, like us, for us, it just rolled through. There was
Yeah.
no, you know, but there is something to be said about looking back at people from a century prior that gives it a nice little sort of nostalgia whatnot to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that. And you know what I like more than that is I like younger people today, the generation after me, or even the generation after that, my grandkids' age, going back and discovering these things. Like how many times around Christmas time have you seen that old Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life?
A handful of times back in the day.
Easily the most popular Christmas movie folks are watching that I'm seeing videos on YouTube about. That and The Christmas Story with Ralphie and the BB gun. Those two movies right there. And it's like, you know what? That's the kind of stuff that I grew up with. It's a Wonderful Life. We're talking 1946. So, I mean, before my time, into my dad was a year old when that movie came out. So no, he was 2 years old when that movie came out. So we're talking ancient, even by my standards. But it's something that I grew up with, and younger folks are finally embracing number one, black and white movies. What the hell? But they're seeing it for what it is, and it's like, damn, that was really a good movie. That was really something to make you think. And it's just like, yes. See, sometimes old school is pretty cool.
I hate to throw this into this that you're saying, but if that were true, I would avoid saying it. In fact, I'm compelled to because it popped into my head. So I'm going to
Well,
throw this out.
one
At,
small victory at a time, and I'll take it.
so this is what I thought when you were saying that.
Mhm.
Yes, in a localized to you way, according to what you run across.
Mhm.
But the first thing that popped into my head when you were saying that kids today are now finding and this and that,
Mhm.
I know you mean some.
Yeah.
Um, but what popped into my head was the savagery that exists in terms of what it is today with countless, like millions of people in America alone, um, And like when you surf the web and all the insane nuanced,
but,
it's an over. Go ahead.
but the insane has always been there, and it's never going to go away.
No,
What?
that's not my point. My point is in reference to what kids today are doing.
And mine is in reference to what kids were doing when I was an even younger kid.
No,
Remember, the Berkeley riots were right, up the road from me.
no. But can I just it's one simple point that I'm making.
Okay.
Just one. The point is that there's so many people out there today on about whatever strange little nuanced discipline or interest, they dress up like cats or whatever the heck is going on. And all I was saying is that what popped into my head when you said kids today are finding and this and that is like, yeah, and they're also finding, oh look, we can dress up as freaking turtles and walk down Main Street in a coordinated effort to be a society of turtles instead of you and stuff like that. That's what popped into my head. Neither here
And
nor there.
yeah, but there was also a segment of society doing that when I was a kid. I mean, the Flower Children were not the mainstream. The Summer of Love was not a mainstream thing.
Yeah,
You know, the
yeah,
Berkeley riots and the Watts riots, that was not a mainstream thing.
yeah.
And people were predicting the end of civilization back then, too. What I'm getting at is the only thing that has changed is people's names and the day on the calendar. That's the only thing that's changed, you know. But we still find that nostalgic thing. We tend to forget that. And in 15 or 20 years, we'll forget the BS that's going on now because it's cyclical. It's all on the wheel. It's going to keep coming
No, we'll
around
forget it.
under a different name, under a different title.
We'll forget it shorter
Mhm.
than that.
Yeah.
We'll forget it by
We're going to look back on the conversations we're having today and go, oh, wow, man, our parents were dumb, you know, or kids will anyway.
well, no, in
But
this
still,
scenario.
there are those little moments where you see the light bulb goes off on in some younger person's head and go, that was excellent. It's like, yeah, you get it. Not everything before 1990, before 2015 was wrong and stupid. There were some good things back then too. There was a lot of bad. Don't get me wrong. It was not a Coke commercial. And
Yeah,
there was a
well,
lot of stupidity. I mean,
I don't
I've
know.
said it before, I'll say it again. The dumbest thing about the 60s and 70s was the way we dressed. But, you know,
No, I don't know. I don't know. I think that I give it. Well, both things can be true. I was gonna say that because the idea is whatever pops into your head according to the conversation you share and whatnot. And so I'm thinking to myself, yeah, in retrospect, immediately, yeah, there was a lot of stupid things, but I can't help to be more fond than not
oh,
of
me too.
that time.
Me too. You know, there are certain things that were never my style. Platform shoes was never my style. I was a tennis shoe guy. The most you would see me is a pair of hiking boots. And that was only if we were going fishing or something like that, where I thought it was going to be there was a possibility I would get my feet wet, and I didn't want to be on wet sneakers all day. You know, there were some things that I just didn't participate in. But yeah, I had bell bottom pants. That was the style. It was hard to find pants that weren't bell bottoms. You know, so um, uh, not much for tie dye. Had a little bit of it, but nothing really wild or anything. But it was all around me. I tell you what. I don't know. Just some weird stuff. Let's see. Jim Dockrell saying here mini skirts were in fashion. Yep. Birth control came into vogue. Yep. And very few STDs. Wrong. You just didn't hear about them on the news every day. I still remember those public service announcements. Oh, man.
Where are Jimmy?
No, no. Those were dirty, slithery things for dirty, slithery people. You didn't even mention that word. in public. That changed in the 80s with the AIDS epidemic. You didn't even acknowledge those things existed. And in fact, it was kind of the opposite of what it became, because it was like, if I ever find one of those things in your pocket, young man, you're in major, major trouble. It's like, okay, well, I will never get one of those then.
I had
Well,
my
never,
okay,
other than, not
go
only
ahead.
that, I couldn't tell you where to go get them. I think I knew you could go to the drugstore. But when you're a 15-year-old kid, the last thing you're going to do is walk up to the pharmacist and ask for something, because they weren't out in front, they were behind the counter. That's the last thing you're going to do, is go to a pharmacist and talk about that.
I kept mine one and all throughout school in the first years of um in a little, well, and it's packed in my wallet, and when I finally pulled it out, have you ever seen like when they find old parchments stuck away,
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
and it's collapsing, you can barely. So no, but I knew exactly where to get. You went to the drugstores.
Yeah,
um
I kind of knew that, but like I said, I'm not going up and asking some dude, especially with a little old lady behind me in line, because, like I said, at the time, the stigma was those were dirty things for dirty, slithery people. You know,
I was put through some changes when I was a kid. I My girlfriend, uh in during that time, and she, and now thinking back on it, it's kind of a, but she, could you please go get me some
feminine
feminine
hygiene
products?
products. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm the man, and um yeah, I'm gonna do that for her.
Hmm.
Of course, sweetheart, of course, yeah. And so I went over to the thing. I walked in, and then I walked down the aisle, and all the colors started to become pink and soft. And as I walked through, and instead of like underarm deodorant that had like a brutish
Yeah.
green vomit like look, they started
Hmm.
to become like these soft pastels. And I remember it, and I saw the napkin, or let me, the
The
product,
product.
and I was like, I picked it up, and then I looked down the aisle towards the register. I was like, oh crap. It all hit me then, because the problem is that you're a kid, you want to do the right thing, but you're still learning, and now you're realizing that this is embarrassing as hell. Because what, like, your mind is thinking, what is the person going to think of you? But in reality, what it is, well, it's just that it's a little bit of that self,
Hmm. It is.
but
B10.
I went right up. Well, to
Mhm.
finish the thing, I went right up and looked that person I forget, but I looked them straight at, and like that, and purchased it and walked out. And when I walked out, I felt relief. Anyways, go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah, because it was in a bag now, and people aren't watching you.
Yeah.
Okay, now be 10 years old on a Saturday. Your mother sends you to the store to go buy them.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh,
and you're talking about that. Yeah, going down that aisle, and everything is pastel colors, and there are words that you have never encountered before, and you don't know what the hell you're looking for. Pull out the slip of paper. Okay, match up the words. That's it. Grab it. And just like you said, you turn and looked up the aisle towards the register. That aisle looked 20 miles long. And you knew everybody was looking at you.
yeah. It
Walk
felt
up.
that way at least.
The only thing I had the presence of mind to do was go to this one cashier. She was an older woman. And I figured maybe she would have a little sympathy and not humiliate the kid. You know, I need a price check on register for, or something like that, call attention to it. And I guessed right. She rang it up, took the money, put it in a paper sack, and then put the receipt in the sack and said, there you go. She had a smile on her face, but she was very pleasant, didn't call any attention to it. And once it was in that bag, it's like, whew, safe. Okay, cool. And I got to this, I got home and I'm like, don't do that to me no more.
You see, those are experiences that removed 3,000 some odd miles away, we experienced locally,
Hmm.
one out of endless amounts of different little. Now, you could say that that's something that could happen anywhere in the world.
It sure could.
So it's not like, but all these things, like going back to what Jim said as far as what has changed,
Hmm.
nothing, and so on, from one day to the next.
Hmm.
It's not a throwaway line, but I'm not gonna go there. I'll go somewhere else. If there's changes all around us
Hmm.
constantly, every second, in ways that we can't even fathom.
Oh, yeah.
But if we ponder it, we would agree on at least any number of things that are constantly changing. Um, you know, but I will say, if you were to be removed from society at large, technology, and all the things that surround us now, and left to our own devices, sort of thrown back to the Stone Age, um, all the externalities would basically cease for us. And so a lot of the things that we this is my point, a lot of the things that we experience, we're taking in from our senses. Well, no, everything we experience, we're taking in from our senses, from outside into our environment.
Uh-oh. Your mic just died. Your mic just died.
Am I back?
Okay, you're back. Yes.
It
I don't
just
know what
disconnected.
happened. All of a sudden there was a click, click, and then the mic died. It just did it again. Ruh-roh, Reggie. Well, let's see how long I can tap dance while he gets his technical difficulties handled. So let's take a look up here. Who we got in the chat? And let's see, the kids of the 60s and 70s had the Beatles, Aerosmith, Frampton, etc. Big block Chevelles and Fords, glorious times. Let's not forget the Hemi engine Mopars.
It had some hiccups.
Yeah, looks like it had a couple.
Um, if it does it again, it's the same thing, something or other. But anyways, just what I wanted to say is that taken somewhere where there's none of the external stimuli,
Hmm.
which is what we take in from our senses, it gives
Hmm.
us the perception of things happening around us,
Right.
things in politics, things in medicine, things in finance, things in entertainment,
Sure.
communication with others about daily activities. It creates a scenarios around us that we incorporate into our thinking because they're being presented to us.
Hmm.
And so it appears like when somebody falls on the TV screen or internet or whatnot, or any number of little things that we see, just by simply observing these things, whatever catches our fancy becomes something to, let's say, chew on, or it's sitting somewhere there, which is how we end up talking to each other about things, because we're, in one way, because it's things we've seen on the internet or on the news or whatever. And all these things create this, I don't want to say illusion, but all these things give us the sense that there is a change, a progression. To speak on what Dockrell was sort of saying, that
Yeah.
there's no change. Um, and the last thing I'll say is that something said like that, which I get what he's saying, like we're still here and whatnot and
Yeah,
such.
there's no big, huge, profound change just because a number changed on a calendar.
Right. But that the fact that I understand, like you do, exactly what Jim said
Hmm.
by what he wrote, that is completely wild and and not necessarily the most accurate. So what I'm getting at is that he's saying that you know it and I know it because we've interpreted a lot of non-spoken
Well,
things that we've grown up to understand. So it's almost not sign language, but it's almost kind of like a cultural catalog of information.
well, if you remember, I think he was just playing off of what I said was talking about the tradition of, just before New Year's, you talk about the year that was, then after New Year's, you talk about the year that was and where you're going to go forward just based on tradition. And then I finished that up by saying, and we don't even admit that it's just another day that ends with a Y. I think he was commenting on my comment that it's just another day, that nothing profound changed just because one number on the calendar changed. You know, um, it's still Tuesday, and we're still here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast. Some things are just haven't changed. Maybe some things did change. I mean, new laws were enacted and what have you, but I don't feel any different than I did day before yesterday. It's just we made one more trip around the sun. Yeah, yes, we avoided the asteroids. you know,
I think both things are true. Some things don't, some things, well, I don't even know if that's true.
yeah,
If taken serious, instead of using the collective leapfrog of some saying and that we understand already, like I understand
hmm,
at the level of what it is, but what I'm saying is that there's more to it than
oh
that.
yeah,
And as you said, maybe some things, maybe something in politics or something. So there's always some sort of perceived progression somewhere.
oh yeah,
But all I'm saying is that if you took all of it away, the external things coming in, and we were sitting on in some island or some jungle
hmm,
area without all the, for
yeah.
us in
Would we
that
even,
scenario,
yeah, would we even keep track of the days? Would they have any meaning to us?
I mean, at least there would be less of a I don't even know if that's true. It, I think it would probably be us in a jungle with less perception of forward momentum in terms of a whole bunch of stuff happening,
Yeah,
and that's due to our access to information, which
yeah. Well, and that's why I was breaking it down to the easiest. I mean, think about that. If you're in the jungle, does it matter to you if it's Thursday or Sunday? Would you even care? Maybe you would keep track. Maybe you wouldn't. I mean, it's just going to depend on the individual, obviously.
you would think the closest equivalent I can think of are the Mayans and such, and they did have calendars and such, so it was
Sure.
important for some purpose or
Well,
another.
it was crucial to them because that's how they planted their crops. They had to know when winter was coming. They had to know when spring was coming. They had to know when to harvest. So they had to keep track of that stuff. And so they figured out ways of doing it. But it being 12:30 at on a Tuesday afternoon was not important really, because somebody was going to ring the bell or blow in the horn or what have you to call everybody to when it was time to pray or do whatever. And there
The
were
next
certain
sacrifice.
signals that something, yeah, there were certain signals that they gave for something else and what have you. Yeah, somebody, they could keep track of a duration of time. Um, you've heard of it was a thing called a water thief. You ever heard of that?
No.
It was a little vessel. They would take a pot and they would take another little bowl that had a hole in it, a very, very small hole. And they knew they could put a certain amount of water up to a line and suspend this bowl over this pot so the water dripped down into the pot. And when that bowl ran empty, a certain amount of time they knew a certain amount of time had passed. So that could be important. There were some Asian societies that had incense that had different sense different aromas in them. And they would light a stick at one time and it would burn, it would be sandalwood. Then all of a sudden it would be rose blossom. And that's how they would keep track of duration. But they couldn't keep track of, well, it's 11:15 a.m. or it's 6:30 p.m. But they could tell that an hour had passed or their equivalent of an hour. So they knew how to keep track of the important things that were important to them right at the time. We're the ones, Western civilization is the ones who learned how to mechanize it and all that other good stuff. And that was basically when the Industrial Revolution came along, because people suddenly had to be to work at a certain time. And that's when knowing what hour of the day it was became important. But before that, farmer didn't care if it was 5:30 in the morning or 5:15 in the morning. He knew the sun was up. I got to go to work.
I don't know, dude. I'm not gonna touch that. I'm not going with. I'm not. I can't go with you with that bold of a. I was okay up until you said your conclusion of. I'm not even gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there because I have a doubt about that they didn't care about what
Well,
hour of the day was.
there were certain people who did, like navigators on boats, the pilot of a boat. When they had to start keeping track of time, you sail in this direction for a certain amount of time, then you could sail in another direction. That's when that became important. But knowing the hour of the day and what time it was, that there was one clock on the ship controlled by the quartermaster, and that clock was under lock and key, and the quartermaster was the only one that had the key to open it, lift the lid and see what time it was, then close it, lock it up, and it stayed secured in a chest until it was time to check it again.
I don't like the emphasis. Well, that's fine. Everything you just said. Europe
Mm-hmm.
and this lack of not telling hour from the next being important prior to the 1700s.
Well, no, that was about the I want to say 13 or 1400s, right in that area, when mechanical clocks became viable with a spring.
You said
That was,
Industrial Revolution, though.
well, but for the public, yes, but for maritime navigation, that came in about the 1400s. But for
Right.
the common guy like you and me, it didn't really become all that important until the Industrial Revolution began.
I'm not. Well, and I'm not gonna research that right now because that's too much. So, but I feel like there's something there that's not quite. I wouldn't be bold to say that.
Look into it.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that I wouldn't be bold right now with. I feel that without looking into it,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe not today, but that people. My reference point is we could use London, but my reference point is places like Madrid, Cadiz.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, courts, businesses. That
Mm-hmm.
didn't start yesterday. It didn't start in the 1700s.
No, you're absolutely right.
It didn't even start in the 1600s. It didn't even start in the 1500s. Those cities, towns, and hamlets, and you could go back into, for goodness sakes, Rome. People had schedules. They had to be in different places. You're saying be there that day or when I don't know. I think that it was more. I feel like it would be that I'm gonna have to look into it, but I don't want to because I've got other
Okay.
things. But it's such a interesting.
Okay. The public told time based on the bells of the church. And you go to Germany, we experienced that in Germany.
That's
It
good.
it is the case. I mean, you may not always know what the bells meant, but you knew they were coming. It may be just calling the monks in from the fields for breakfast, or calling them in for prayer, or doing whatever, but you knew there was going to be a progression of bells that could be heard all over the place. I mean, we had a castle on the hill above us when we lived in Germany, and then the bells rang, oh God, probably 10 times a day, maybe 12. But we didn't know what it was for, but you could hear the bells ring and go, it's 10 in the morning. And look at the clock, and it would be 10 in the morning. Now, if you were working out in the fields, you didn't need to know it was 10 in the morning. You just needed to know, oh, there's the bell. We got to go in. It's time for prayer, or it's time for whatever. So that's what I'm getting at. They basically timed along that, and you're absolutely right. The city hall bell was a little bit different than the church bell. Maybe the city hall had one bell, and the church had two or four or eight. So you could tell by different sounds during different times of day. But up into the 1900s, like the 1920s and 30s, and I think it finally died off in the 40s. You talked about London. There was a market for selling the time. There were people out on the street that had pocket watches. And for 10 pence, you could you give them your 10 pence, and they would pop open and let you look at their watch to see what time it was. You know, and it was also a subscription service. Like if you had a you ran a law firm and you had four lawyers working with you, you paid them a certain amount a month, and every day they would come in, show you their watch, and you could set your timepieces there within your office based on their watch. And they would come in every business day. They set their watch based on the big clock in Greenwich. So selling the time was, I mean, all the way up into the 1930s. And even then, it was important for people to know what time of day it was. But clocks and watches were still expensive, and not everybody could afford one. So, I mean, before the alarm clock was invented, there were people that walked around. They were called knocker uppers. They would walk around, you paid them a fee, weekly, monthly, however you arranged it with them, and they would come up and knock on your window at a certain time to wake you up because you had to be in the factory in a half hour or what have you. And that went up into the 1910s, 1920s. And then reliable alarm clocks became cheap enough for people to own them. And that kind of went out the window. They had to go get jobs.
In towns across, well, at least where I've investigated, they had, I guess, what you'd call a sundial
Mm-hmm.
in hamlets or villages, and as well. Apart, actually, we have. I've lived across the church, well, a few blocks that every Sunday they ring the bell and whatnot, and so I get that. Um, but I'm just saying that everything you just said sounds like time was important, and I was just taken aback because anybody listening would think maybe that they would say, well, also then prior to the industrial, the minute by minute wasn't important. And I get what you're saying in a sense that today we're always checking the clock
Mm-hmm.
in frequency,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that wouldn't have been the case. They would probably have had in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, or I mentioned, some sort of thing in a village, in a town, in a city that identified like a clock, a
Yes.
tower, a bell, and that would inform the population at large and whatnot. Apart from their own senses, you know that as you roll
Right.
through the day, the sun is climbing up. I mean, it's not like people were walking around not knowing that the sun is climbing up in the sky and coming. So, and you know when it's overhead, it's noon. And
Right.
so, and so I get what you're saying. I just the emphasis on that it wasn't important as much.
But remember that I said important to the public at large. Now it depends on where you're at. If you're in a big city, it's more important to you than if you're out in the country.
I
If
think
you're
it's important out in the country too.
well, they need to know that the sun is up there, but they can look up and they can see the sun is up there. They know when it's getting ready to get dark. They also know when it's time to round up the horses and put all the equipment away because it's going to be too damn dark to see if we don't start doing it now. But it didn't matter to them if that was 5:15 in the afternoon or
How do you?
6:15 in the afternoon.
But how can you? I see. I don't want to. But I think it's too bold to say it didn't, unless that there's like sufficient examples say it didn't matter. The didn't matter. I don't know what villagers. I I don't want to be a stickler with that one, but I think that that one's the one that really that it didn't matter to. Well, I don't know. Did it or
Well,
maybe
I'm sure it mattered to some,
okay
but
okay
most people who, was buy, buying a clock or a watch was a real expensive thing. And most folks never made enough money to where they could own one because they were mainly subsistence farming or ranching or doing something along those lines. If you're a tanner and your job is to tan hides all day, you're probably never going to be able to afford something that would cost what we would make in a year. But if you lived in the city where you're making a lot more money and it's more important that you be at a certain place at a certain time, it's more important that you know what time it is so you can be at a certain place at a certain time. But again, if you're picking grapes, it doesn't matter to you if it's 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning. All you know is you got this one more row and then you can go have a sandwich. That's what's important,
I see.
you know.
Yeah, it's not like yeah. I'm trying to put myself. I just don't. I felt like wow, people in the I don't know 1600s and so on. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I yes, you look back that far and you think to yourself, there's lots of things like that you're saying,
Mhm.
but I kind of want to
Now,
say
again,
that
granted, it could have been important to some people, but we take it for granted that we can just pick up the phone, look at it, and go, "Oh, it's 7:19 p.m." I don't even
yeah,
have to pick up my phone; it's down on the bottom right corner of my computer screen. Them never having that luxury, they knew no other way. So they knew what they had to do over the course of the day or the week or the month or the year. They just made it happen. And if today I walked out of the house and went to the barn at 7:06 a.m., but yesterday I went out of the barn at 7:15 a.m., it wasn't important. I'm going out to the barn to get the stuff that I need to do my work.
precision was not
Hmm.
accessible necessarily.
Yeah, not to the
What you
common folks. Not to the common folks. One of the great things about what we do is we both just said, yeah, we're not going to get into that because, we'd have to do research and this, that, and the other. Is we say things like that, and the folks listening to us do it for us. So
did somebody look for it?
Dan did. Dan Haryu. It says from Wiki, beginning in the 12th century Europe, towns and monasteries built clocks in high towers to strike bells to call the community to prayer. Public clocks played an important timekeeping role in daily life until the 20th century, when accurate watches became cheap enough for ordinary people to afford. So, yeah, in the city, there was a need to know that it's 10 o'clock in the morning.
No, but so just what he wrote
Well,
without adding just half a second, without adding to the extra stuff of what people. I can't say what's important to the individual, but just what he wrote,
hmm
okay, is that he got from Wiki, is a nice layout of
hmm
what we've been talking about,
right.
which is in line with what we've both been talking about,
hmm
um, without doing the research. The extra part is the part that I'm uncomfortable with, which is that they just had no need or people, and I want to give those people. I'm not saying that you're not, but I'm just saying that in the context of in my mind, I'm thinking, no, yes, I get what you're saying, but there had to be people in those villages across. And I'm not saying about a particular village where my answers were specific. I'm saying like in a general sense.
Read what he says. Towns and monasteries built clocks in high towers to strike bells. That's what I said. If you live in the city, if you live in the town, they saw it as important enough to need to build a public clock. And
Yeah,
maybe
but
it was important that you
is
know
that what
what
you
time it was.
said?
Yeah, that's what I said.
And was it what I said?
I think you were missing the part about towns and monasteries.
No,
No? Okay. All right, then I misheard.
but I'm asking you. So well, no, you heard what you heard, but and what he wrote there is a
hmm
perfect layout of what we've both been talking about,
hmm
because it's inconceivable that a church isn't part of a town, especially what the part that I'm not comfortable with is the necessity for individuals. Now you can extrapolate from that what you just read and
hmm
leap to a conclusion, but I'm not willing to leap to a conclusion that it wasn't important for these people. Now the accuracy part, of course, if you don't have a pocket watch, if you don't have a clock in your town, you don't have, but that time isn't important. I wasn't comfortable with that notion, although I get what you're saying. I just wanted to
Now,
throw my caveat out,
and
out.
I threw my caveat out and said it may have been important for some people, but it
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't accessible to the general population.
yeah, yeah. That's why I'm including
Okay.
what you've said into
hmm
my words to
Okay.
to have you to so you can see that I'm acknowledging everything that you
Yeah.
said.
Okay.
Like I'm incorporating everything you said in a dignified and clear way, but still saying I I, I was leaning more towards giving them more credit as individuals. That's all. That's all. I was
Well,
incorporating.
I was giving him credit as well by saying to some people it was important, but to others maybe it wasn't. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm
So
perfectly comfortable with that.
let's see here. Dan continues. He says, "I know my town's current clock was installed in 1809 along with a bell. We were incorporated in 1767. Don't know if we had a clock or a timekeeper before that. People had tall clocks in their homes. So, yeah. But
Look,
you had to be pretty wealthy to have one of those
look.
clocks because they were not cheap.
People also had, and you can see this on the on people also had candles, and
Mm.
they put little sticks and little whatnots, metal bits into the candle,
Yeah.
and they calculated out.
hmm
Now, is it as accurate as a pocket watch? No, but what I'm
No.
getting at is this: there's plenty of different things that we're not even talking about
hmm
that people did back then
hmm
on so many levels to be bold to say it wasn't as important. Although I know exactly what you mean, I'm just saying that I was leaning in this direction, saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." That's all. But I know what you mean in terms of
Well, again, the metal pieces and the candle, that's just a different manifestation of the same thing as the water thief, which I believe it was Jim came up with it. What do you have? Clepsydra. That literally translates to water thief. Well, thief of water. Kleptos, thief, hydra, water. So
it's another version of
it's
that.
another version of that. You can measure the duration of time And they've been able to do that all the way back to ancient China, and even as far back as the ancient Egyptians with sundials and what have you. You could measure a duration of time. But to be able to say it's 9:17 a.m., I got to be there by 9:30, that's relatively modern.
Yeah.
Within the last, really honestly, for the general public at large, about 200 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
That's fine. And
it's just one of those things that we don't even think about.
yeah, and all the other, I think that's okay. I, I I think that there's more there to look at, and I find it interesting
Oh
enough.
yeah.
But I don't know that. I mean, I might just end up doing it, but there's too many different things.
Oh
But
yeah.
there's too many things to look at too. And now you've thrown this one in. But um, it's something to look into. But I don't want to go in that
Well,
direction.
I think what started it all was talking about the passage of time with it being the new year. And I got to admit, I did get caught up in it a little bit. Um, there over the last couple of days, when I started, I knew the podcast was coming up, and I started thinking about, well, wow, man, um, we've got all this stuff. It's 2024, and a lot of things happened in entertainment last year. A lot of movies came out. A lot of things happened. Let me go look, and I want to go find some highlights of some of the cool stuff that happened over the course of the last year, both good and bad. I mean, we lost some performers, and we lost some actors, some musicians, some singers. And it was the year of the 80-year-olds. You know,
Of the
it was the year of the 80-year-olds, because like the Rolling Stones released a new album and are talking about a limited tour, and they're all in their 80s for the most part. I mean, all kinds of stuff was going on for 80-year-olds last year. But the more I got into it, and the more I started looking at these different websites and took note of what was going on, what happened last year, and who had Elton John did a concert tour that grossed $900 million, but so did Beyonce and Taylor Swift. The more I started going through that, the more I started thinking, man, I don't give a toss. I really don't care
about
about any of this stuff, about who had what album out this year and what movie is coming out next year. And it's just like, who cares? I mean, I know that's just me, but I really couldn't give a flip.
well, because maybe like myself, you have too many other interesting things that
Yeah.
occupy your okay, so there's no there's no saying I'm in my mind, uh oh, I'm bored, there's just nothing to
Yeah.
do.
I wish I could be bored. I wish I could be bored.
There is no such thing as that. And I'll tell you, um right now there's a million and a half different things. Now the funny thing is, like, we can do, and just with the internet alone, dude, we have, and I know we say it all the time, but we have everything at our disposal as far as anything you want to. Sure, you can be led astray, and maybe you end up thinking things that. But if you really hone things down, you could, whatever. In my case, explore what nots and this and that.
Mhm.
There's no getting bored. There
Yeah.
just isn't.
No. There's always something. There's always something. Um, I did find some cool stuff. Like I discovered, for instance, the Leonard Skinner album, Second Helping, turns 50 years old this year in April. And that, of course, was Sweet Home Alabama on that album. I thought that was cool. Wow, Sweet Home Alabama is 50 years old this year.
So it's sort of like sweet home
Yeah.
Alabama.
Yes, exactly. Like, holy cow, man. Dude, I'm old. Leonard Skinner is 50. Um, let's see here. There was another one I was going to bring up. There's a few other here that I really, you know, um, the Kiss album, Hotter Than Hell, 50 years old this year. I know. Let's see here. Steely Dan's Pretzel Logic is 50 years old.
I like Steely Dan.
Yeah, I love that. So the song Ricky Don't Lose That Number is 50 years old. Next month, February 20th, it was the release date. Dolly Parton's Jolene is 50 years old, February 4th. I mean, a lot of our favorite music, man, but that's okay.
Dolly Parton's Tinseltown tunes.
Mhm. Um, movies,
Boo 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 boo. What?
movies.
Oh,
Blazing Saddles turns 50 years old this year. Um, Chinatown turns 50 years old this year.
Chinatown. I love that movie. I love it because it's so well. What continue?
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
so old school vibe type, like
yeah.
back in the day, early 1900s vibe and whatnot,
Yeah.
but filmed in the 70s
The
and
30s, 30s and 40s film noir detective flicks.
yeah, yet filmed
Um,
in the 70s at some point.
yep. 74.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
The Longest Yard, the original with Burt Reynolds.
I saw that like once or twice when I was like on the special TV, whatnot, blah
Hmm.
blah blah. And it was okay. I
Yep.
don't remember it well, but yeah,
Well, here's one that you will remember, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
yeah, that's a
50
classic.
years old.
That's a classico.
um, oh, wow. The Towering Inferno.
I never saw that one.
You didn't miss a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, it looked like one that I didn't want to see.
We went through a spate of disaster flicks in the 70s. I want to say it started with Airport, not Airplane. Airplane was a spoof on all these airport disaster movies. But then it went to the Poseidon Adventure, about a luxury cruise liner that capsizes.
I did see that one.
I saw it too. It was actually pretty good, pretty decent. The Towering Inferno. My dad wanted to go see it, so we went and saw it. It was okay. You know, wasn't my favorite. Um, all kinds of these disaster movies, the earthquake and then volcano, and I mean, all kinds of stuff like that. Probably one of my top five movies. And the way I work my top five list, it forever changes and evolves depending upon my mood. One week, one thing will be number one, and maybe the next week, something else will be number one. But the top five kind of stays there. Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein turns 50 this year.
I never saw it.
Oh my God. An absolute classic. An absolute classic.
I've always avoided it because it was a spoof on. To me, from my vantage point, it just reminded me. Oh, it's comedy, so it's something like what's this duo Abbott and Costello, and I was like,
No, nothing like that. It was a comedy. It's a Mel Brooks comedy. But it was written, the screenplay was written mainly by Gene Wilder. So, and in fact, it's the only Mel Brooks movie where Mel Brooks himself doesn't appear in the movie, but he does do a sound effect in the soundtrack. But that was Gene Wilder's condition for making that movie. You can't be in it. So instead, they had guys like Peter Boyle played the monster, and then Gene Hackman played Harold the blind man. Just a bunch of different cameos from different people. What to me, one of the best movies ever made.
I don't know why, but I just remembered that one with Richard Pryor when Gene Wilder and he get locked into a prison
In
into a
prison.
cell
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of and he's just act cool and
Mm-hmm.
he
He's
starts
walking around, darn right.
he goes but he goes over the top. It's so
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. Like he just
That's right.
goes.
We bad. We bad.
So
Yep.
it just popped into my mind. It's just such great stuff.
I
Anyway,
don't remember which Richard Pryor special it is, but you'll find clips of it on YouTube. But Richard Pryor did a stand-up routine talking about making that movie, and they filmed it at the Arizona Penitentiary not too long before that penitentiary was closed down and all the inmates were moving out. I'll find a link to it and send it to you. It's hilarious. No, I will not put it on our Facebook page because somebody will frag us for it. So, but it is on YouTube. You can find that scene. It's funny stuff. Haru says BTO's Not Fragile turns 50 this year. A very underrated album. One of my favorite albums.
back to oysters.
Mm-hmm.
BTU.
BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Oh, okay.
If you
That's
think
another.
you know Bachman Turner Overdrive, play Not Fragile. You'll be like, that's Bachman Turner Overdrive. Holy cow.
I never sat and listened to them nor purchased any of their albums.
Oh man. That first tune is just whoa. That's BTO. Yep, that's
See,
BTO.
that's an area of that's a band that I never even I'm sure I've heard them. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
have any reference points that I can attach a song to the name. I just have the name and the unknown
Taking
song.
care of business every day.
Oh,
That's
okay, so now
Bachman
I
Turner.
know.
Yep. And what was their other big one? Oh God, I had it in my head a minute ago. I had to think of taking care of business because I knew you would know that one. Um,
Yeah, that one I know.
you ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh, okay, they're great. Yeah, I like that song a lot.
Roll on down the highway.
I don't know how that goes.
Let it roll down the highway. Yeah, if you heard it, you that one didn't get as much airplay as taking care of business or you ain't seen nothing yet. Those two got massive amounts of airplay. Roll on down the highway got some, but not nearly as much as the other two. But Not Fragile, one of my favorite albums.
What did Dan say?
Dan says, oh my God, Eloy, Mark has mentioned that album multiple times and you haven't given it a listen? For shame.
I mean,
I mention a lot of things, so I
have
don't
you
know.
mentioned that a lot of times, Mark?
Yeah,
That album?
yeah.
You've mentioned that album a lot of times?
Yeah, over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. Remember, this is episode 265. I know I've mentioned it in at least 3 episodes.
Um,
I think it was one of my favorites when we did our top 5 favorites. And I don't think it came up in the least favorite that we did.
yeah, it's the sort of band that you're occupied with all the other stuff you're occupied. It's the sort of
Mhm.
band that you hear the songs on the album, you know the songs, but you're not paying attention. And I never connected the. It
Mhm.
wasn't a staple of mine
Right.
that band, nor that I'm aware of my friends locally.
Yeah.
Even though the songs played on
Well,
on
it
radio.
was early 70s rock, early to mid 70s rock. Um, Jim Dockrell brings up Sledgehammer. That's another one. You
How's that one?
you probably never heard it. It was one of
Sledgehammer.
no, that was Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
Um, Sledgehammer got played a lot on FM, but it was not top 40 pop.
So I guess
I
Boston.
hesitate to call it a deep cut because it did get little bit of airplay, but it didn't get a lot.
So I guess the Boston area was totally wild and radical over these people.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I think I think what made people perk up and listen was like taking care of business or you ain't seen nothing yet because that got the name out there. But like I said, if you listen to Sledgehammer or Four Wheel Drive or Roll On Down the Highway or Not Fragile, you wouldn't think it was the same band.
The only good thing that ever came out of Boston in the last 30 some odd years was the band by the same name.
A lot of good food
I'm
came out
joking.
of that
It's a joke.
area,
It's not
but it
true.
wasn't in the last 30, 40 years. Um,
Oh no, yeah. There's a couple of people that threw tea into a harbor. There's some founding father type people back
mhm.
then. There's a few,
Let's not forget baked beans, Boston baked beans. I mean, come on,
yeah. The candy
um,
or the actual beans?
both. Um, See now, Jim, I thought it was Rob Bachman that was the drummer. Bachman, however you want to pronounce it. He pronounces it both ways himself.
No, I think it's when I it's been mentioned. It's not like I have no, but when it's Bachman Turner Overdrive, or
That's
is it
what we.
Bachman? No, no, it's
That's what.
Bachman.
That's what we say. But
That's what I hear.
he pronounces it. Randy Bachman pronounces it Bachman, but he knows everybody knows it as Bachman, so he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And no, they're not out of Boston; they're out of Canada.
Well, I pronounce the Canadian band Rouge um, as an example, and
Rush.
Rouge,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that other people just say Rush, but over here it's typical for kids to say the band Rush, and that they do that swishing sound at the end. So
Mhm.
there you have it.
Rush. Well, that's
And
when that shh is when Getty jumps off of the bass and onto the synth. Yeah.
and then there's the Beatles.
Mhm.
We typically call them the Beatles. Hey,
Beatles.
dude, did you hear that Beatle tune? And
Yeah,
yeah,
they're from Washington, right? Beattle, Washington. Mhm. Oh,
the
man.
Rolling Stones.
Yeah. I got Linda on a wordplay pun one time. I was telling her she had been out in the field or something. We were stationed at Hunter Army Airfield on in Savannah, Georgia, and she had come back from the field. She'd been gone for a couple of days, and I said something about how Keith Richard, and this is one of those cases of the right people will get this joke. I said something about Mick Jagger and Keith Richard had been arrested for stealing horses. And she was like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, it turns out they were running a ring, but they were only stealing horses of one color." She's like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Oh, come on, tell me you've never heard of the stolen roans." And she looked at me like, "Did you just really say that?" And then it was a case of, "Oh my God." And that's all I have to do anymore to get her to get that look out of her is just say, "Tell me you've never heard of the stolen roans." Roan being a color of horse. So anyway, um, I said I had a little throwaway topic. We spent probably it's less of a throwaway than I think. I'm discovering. We spent a good few minutes talking about how everything changes and nothing changes at the same time, more or less. I mean, and I don't know who said it, but there is a quote out there that is the only thing that is going to stay the same is that everything is going to change. So, I mean, but I found this list of 70s slang. And I wonder, how much of it do you still use?
Let's
How
see.
much of it do we still use? And how much of the current slang do these people think they're using that is actually from the 70s? Like, for instance, crib, meaning an apartment or a home, the place you live.
That's not 70s.
That is 70s. That's early 70s.
We never used it.
I still don't use it. How about keep on stepping, meaning to keep it
Yeah.
moving or get out of here.
Nada. Did you ever use nada? That's more of a 80s thing. Nada.
I always did duh, but never nada. No.
Nada. It was nada when somebody said something and like you didn't want and you didn't accept it, or it was
Mhm.
obvious. Somebody would say nada. Well, to answer your what was the word?
It was keep on stepping.
Only used when you're trying to, for me, accentuate the actual meaning of it is that move on or keep going to a friend or some stuff
Or
like that.
get out of here. Keep on
Yeah,
stepping.
but in terms of using it, not because I knew it was incorporated into my daily thing, but because I knew it was something that was said to be, kind of a little bit more dramatic about it.
I never heard it. I never heard of it until I found this list. There's a few that I've never heard of until I found this list.
You've never heard "keep on stepping"?
Nope. I heard keep on trucking, but I never heard keep on stepping.
Okay, I have, and I used it back then. But like I said, it wasn't part of my normal thing. It
Mhm.
was a word that I knew that was said on TV,
Mhm. Now,
and so I used it in the context that I needed it used
okay. Okay.
when I wanted to
I can
emphasize.
see that. I can see that.
Yeah,
Here's Linda pointing out how things change. Crib in the 1800s was where a prostitute worked. That was her room at the house was her crib. And I wonder if that's where that kind of evolved from.
because I know that in the 2000s or maybe even in the 90s, people used to say, "Hey, we're going over to the crib. Come on, let's go, guys." I know people said that. I hated it deeply. Oh, wait a second. MTV had MTV Cribs where they go to, or
Yeah.
Superstar Cribs or something like that. Um, I hated it terribly. I hated the word.
Hmm.
It sounded, I don't want to say, but to
Well,
me, it just, I didn't like it.
yeah, some of them are regional and some of them are cultural. But like this is the most West Coast thing, probably San Francisco, that I could ever imagine. And that was peace, love, and granola, meaning goodbye and good wishes. I have never heard that in my life,
That's very specific.
but I can only imagine that it was from San Francisco. Because it has that whole hippie thing to it. You know what I mean?
Wait a second. What's the saying again?
Peace, love, and granola.
Today, it's peace, love, and granola bars all over the streets. Continue.
Yeah. Peace out. Now, I occasionally I have said peace out.
Yeah, peace out is something from the 90s, I believe.
This is 70s. It's is what it's saying.
Well, then we drew it from the
Hmm.
70s.
What's cracking as a
Yeah.
general greeting? I
Or
still say that.
what's crack a lacking?
Yeah, that came along a little bit later on. Yeah,
Yep.
and I will admit to using crack a lacking, but I will still say what's cracking.
Yeah. Well, I would say if I did, which I can't remember, but I remember it being used. If I did say it, I would say what's cracking as opposed to what's crack a lacking. But I would usually probably say something to, "Hey, what's up? Hey, what's up?" was the introduction. That's it.
Hmm.
I think that was the standard.
Um, they got some here 70s ways of saying cool. Cool is one of those slang terms that started in the 30s and just has kept going, meaning something good. Let's see how many of these are still used, or how many of you used or still use. The bomb.
Yeah,
That was late disco era.
yeah. Well,
Far, far out.
yeah,
Now,
but that's drawn from the past.
yeah,
I use it drawn from the past.
I, I, I associate that with the '60s. So it was weird for me to see far out
50s?
as as '70s.
I so not 50s. You're far out.
Yeah, see, I associate that with the '60s and the hippie thing, or
I
is it
can see it in the 50s.
68, 69? I don't know. So when they put it on the list from the '70s, I'm like, whoa.
I can picture far out Daddy-O,
Hmm.
and that Daddy-O bit
Hmm.
pushes into the 50s. So I can see that combination.
Hmm.
Um, so far out, I could see in the 50s, but then again,
Yeah, it may be, maybe. Now this one I know is not '70s. Groovy. That is straight in the middle of the '60s.
yeah, I use it.
Um, and that meant cool in a hip way.
Yeah,
Nifty.
I think of Nifty as something older than the 70s.
Yeah, same here. But
Way
here they
older.
say it to mean cool in a neat way.
I could see that back in the 50s.
I think
That's so
you're
nifty,
right.
Tom. Why don't you come over with Martha for
Hmm.
crumpets and whatnot on Sunday? That would be just swell. Swell is
Hmm.
50s for sure.
Yeah. So was bitchin'. Bitchin' was '50s.
See, is it?
Yes, bitchin' and boss were
That's
'50s
boss.
and early '60s.
No, that's boss. I could see that.
Hmm. I was saying that when I was 5 and 6 years old. Oh, that's boss, man.
I never
You
used that.
usually talking about some toy. Off the hook, as in very cool to the extreme.
See, that to me sounds like something from the 90s on.
It to me too. That's why I was surprised to see it on a list of '70s.
Whoever wrote that is a millennial
Hmm.
that's getting his timeline all out of whack.
And here's another one, out of sight. I see that in the '60s.
I see it as early as well placed in the 60s, but I could see it completely in the 50s.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to go back in my brain to some of the movies of the time. Um, let's see, slang for some things. Um, good vibes, positive energy.
That's 60s in my mind.
See, I thought it was later. Here's one that went away. I've not used this in years.
Because
The hair.
I'm sorry, good vibrations.
Hmm.
It's just what I do is I associate the themes. I mean, you do too, but I mean, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
but I can see the word used. So, and it could have come later, derived from when a movie or some sort of song or whatnot. But
Hmm.
good vibrations, the song,
Hmm.
um, came out in the late 60s. I place it in the 60s. Go ahead.
So when does that get shortened down to good vibes?
No, because they didn't come up with. I'm assuming this
Right.
in terms of the thing. I wouldn't assume that they came up with by shortening the long version of the shortened vibes. I think that the vibes. I don't know this, but it feels like it's placed in the 60s. But they could be
Yeah.
totally right. I don't know. It feels like it's the 60s.
And we got to remember 1970 and 71 were part of the '70s, and it wasn't that long after Good Vibrations came out.
Right. It's just a couple of years.
Now, here's one that I have heard used, but I've never used it myself. Hairy eyeball. which means a nasty stare. Somebody giving you the hairy eyeball.
It
I have
doesn't sound
never,
unfamiliar.
I have never used it, but I do know that it was in Arlo Guthrie's Alice's restaurant, and that was in the 60s.
Well, that place is that.
Um, Calling law enforcement or establishment authority figures the man. That's very early 70s, I think, if not late 60s.
I wouldn't know.
Now, somebody else came in here. Who was it? Jim Dockrell said, "Give me the skinny." That
The
is on this
lowdown,
list. The real truth, the real story, or the whole truth. The skinny.
the lowdown is what I chose for that.
That's another one that was next. Lowdown is the truth or an overview of the facts. Give me the lowdown.
So I used two um, popular sayings to describe each other.
Yeah.
See, that's how it's going to happen. It's going to be a series of made up things culturally that will refer to each other until the English language is no longer recognizable.
Now, I never used this one. This is ways of 70s slang for people. I never used this one, but I have heard it, and I've heard other people use it back in the day. Always in reference to a girl, a closet disco queen. And that is a girl who dances at home where nobody can see her, but never in public. I have heard people, I heard girls in high school and just a little bit beyond, I've heard them referred to as closet disco queens.
I never used that one, although it doesn't sound unfamiliar to me.
Yep. Dork. Now I know that goes way back because I want to say late 40s, maybe early 50s, because I know it was used in old movies of that era.
Was it?
And the same with nerd. And in fact, my dad, I remember the first time I heard the word dork. My dad was like, "Oh God, we used to say that when I was a kid." And I'm like, "Really?" You know,
I don't
dork
know.
or dorky.
It doesn't sound from my timeline as imagining it. To me, it sounds like something that would have come from the 70s. Oh, we're talking 70s, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it would something that would come earlier. It sounds like such a corruption. In my mind, it surrounds all the things in the 80s, especially with movies like The Nerds and whatnot, and
Mm-hmm.
Revenge of the Nerds and such. But it would have come earlier as a progress. But you never heard that in things like Welcome Back, Kotter, or this or that I can recall. In any of the shows, like the word just was not used. So if I had to, without me knowing everything that one should about it, it sounds like it was something that probably came out of the 70s into the 80s at the very earliest. But again, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, again, this is words, their list. This is when these were really, really popular and used by the general public.
Do you
Now,
remember
that's
that
not
being
to say
used?
that they were invented then. It's just that they were popular in being used.
Do you remember them being used in the 70s
Some of
era?
them, yes. Some of them, yes. Some of them, like I said, some of them are regional, some of them are cultural, some of them I'd never heard before.
But not on TV. I never heard dork on TV until the 80s.
Oh, I did it. Well, I heard nerd and dork in the 70s on the sitcom Happy Days, which was supposedly set in the 50s.
Yeah, but well, there's a dilemma in
Right.
there because it's a sitcom set in an earlier age
Well, but then
where they
again,
didn't
my father, who was a teenager in the 50s, said, God, I was saying that when I was a kid.
well you
So, I mean, that's anecdotal.
yeah, I don't it feels like from my timeline understanding. But I again, what do
Mm.
I know other than I never paid attention to it until it really stuck out, and it was much later. But it doesn't feel like it should be in the. You said 40s.
Late 40s or early 50s.
I mean, it doesn't feel like it. Are you looking for it? Maybe we'll
No,
clarify
no,
it.
no, 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 no. I'm not
Okay.
looking anything's up.
Maybe somebody will out there, our Google Alexa.
Man, let's see here. Here's one. Spaz, a klutzy person or someone who is acting silly.
50s.
I still remember. I remember hearing it. I don't know if I used it really a lot, but something that made you just kind
You
of
know,
fall apart. Oh my god, I spazzed out.
it sounds like
Kind of lost it.
I can't place it, but I'm stuck on 60s and 70s on that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now Jim brought up another one, space cadet, and that's where I was going next. A space cadet was an airhead or someone who was just goofy.
I would put that in the 50s.
Yeah, I don't know. I now there was a short-lived um, Saturday morning cartoon called The Space Cadets, but I don't think it had anything to do with that.
Or Space Case.
But the Space Case to me was a
What's
lot more
that?
common.
What?
Yeah, the Space Case was a lot more common in the circles that I hung out with.
Yeah, you're a Space Case.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But
stop.
yeah,
You know? Yeah, yeah.
now
I don't, to me, it doesn't. Go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, it doesn't sound. It sounds like it could have been pushed further back, is what I'm saying. But again,
And it may very well have been.
the
This is
problem with
again just the list that were real popular in the 70s. They're not saying that these were invented in the 70s. So
okay, yeah, I'm stuck on when it was invented as opposed to.
now there's one, excuse me. Um, there's one that was popular for maybe 1 or 2 years. Then it became a cliche and it became used by the people it was trying to describe. What did you have a name for somebody who tried like hell to be cool but failed every time they tried?
um, a loser, a doofus. That's more like when they make a mistake or a clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when they try to be cool,
Trying to be cool, but
a poser.
poser. Okay, good one. Good one. They got have in here, and I remember this being around. They call it a jive turkey. But by the time it got popular, the only people who were using jive turkey were jive turkeys.
A jive turkey, the saying I used as a draw from, and I'm talking about back in the day. Another example of me trying to emphasize a something something in what when in conversation. You'll throw in a little curveball
Yeah,
for fun to highlight what you're saying. I knew it wasn't from my era, but I would draw things like that. So I would use jive turkey, but not every day. Just
yeah.
like when it felt like it would sit neat in a little saying or whatnot, I would toss it in on automatic. And to me, it was referencing black exploitation of films of the
and
70s.
and and that's where it became popular. It became popular about the same time with Jimmy Walker in the TV show Good Times,
Yeah,
and that just exploded. And it it was right around that same time, but it wasn't there long. It wasn't around long because if anybody used that word, it was one of those. It was one of those phrases where you just went, "Oh." You just kind of cringed inside and said, you just identified yourself as being the thing you're trying to call out. Because the only person who would use that phrase is the type of person you're trying to describe, you know.
Yeah.
But I like poser because that is more succinct and to the point and doesn't sound nearly as ridiculous.
Let me. This is a segue, but I'm gonna read your name down there,
Uh-huh.
but in Spanish.
Okay.
This is how it would sound like in Spanish. Well,
Go
to
ahead.
my level of Spanish. Chillín like a Villain. Chillín like a Villain. That's
So
what
what so what does that mean? Help, there's a hog in my kitchen, or
it means. Nothing.
okay, I didn't think it meant
I'm just
anything.
phonetically reading it.
Okay. Yeah, I know
Chillín
the double
like.
L's is like a Y. Qiying.
Well, the like would be like.
Like.
The A is a,
Ah.
and the
Bien.
right the yain, because
That's
the two L's together are like a Y sounding.
so that's about the closest thing I can think of to an actual Spanish word is villa. So it'd be like House of Chiying.
Yeah. I just for a moment there, I don't know why, but continue.
Now this one I still use. Copacetic.
I never used it until my friend Glenn started was using it back in the early 2000s in the Everglades,
Mm-hmm.
and I picked it up, and every now and again I'll sprinkle it on in context.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so my reference point to that is early 2000s because I
It
never used it
was
prior.
it was actually it was a term that was coined by Thelonious Monk, the jazz pianist,
Okay.
and I don't know when, but he passed away. When did he pass away? Look it up here. In 1982, he passed away. So it's been around. I don't know when he coined that phrase, but I still use it just to mean, all right, no problem. Yeah, yeah. How things going? Yeah, everything's copacetic. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Ripoff. Lesser value than expected, poor quality, or a waste of money. That's a ripoff.
Mhm.
I would have thought that would be earlier, but then again, I don't know.
I would say, well, remember, my reference point is from the mid 70s on.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about when it was popular, and at that time, I would have just been taking things in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in retrospect, everything I've learned of, in
Yeah,
looking at it, rip off. Um, I would put it in the 70s,
yeah.
maybe sometime in the. I've never heard a reference to it that I can recall. Placing it in the 60s that I can recall. I
Me
can see
either.
it placed in the 70s perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not perfectly. I don't know. You tell me, because you.
Yeah,
But for sure, in the 80s, it was running rampant.
yeah, yeah, yeah. um, Another one that I lost it. Ripoff. I don't think I ever.
Used it.
I don't think I ever heard it. Oh, I've used it a lot. I don't think I remember ever hearing it in the '60s. It was somewhere in the. I was in high school, so we're looking at the mid '70s, and but it also meant to scam somebody out of something or to steal from them. Oh, dude, you ripped me off.
It's interchangeable with stealing or
Mm-hmm.
scamming.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, when we talk, I want to emphasize we're using words without the dictionary next to us,
Oh yeah.
readily available. And it's not like the person we're conversing with, whoever that might be,
Mhm.
is also attentively guiding themselves in this conversation with a dictionary themselves in order to assure each other, each
Yeah.
party, that the words being transmitted to each other are precisely what, and so that, and so it's a hit and miss proposition.
But even then, let's say you do have the dictionary right there handy, and both of us are sitting there thumbing through and going, "Oh, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. That's what he meant." Is that really what you meant? Because you miss so much in text. You missed the inflection of the voice. You missed body language. You miss emphasis. I mean, there's just as just a quick example. We were picking out a paint color. We painted the house about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Well, 2018, we painted the house. And the phrase, "that's pretty blue," it depends on how that's delivered. You could say, "Oh, that's pretty blue." Or you could say, "That's pretty blue." Same three words, but completely different meanings just based on inflection.
You could say that's a pretty blue, and if you want to emphasize the negative, say, but I wasn't much for it.
Well,
And
yeah, but you don't even have to go that far. But you get what I'm saying. With just using text, you miss so much.
no, I'm saying if you wanted to be precise
Yeah, in text you
in
could.
text, you could be, but people resort to, and I've been finding, let me just throw this out. I've been finding, so let me throw this out. I recently opened up a site on Substack, and I'm
I saw
enjoying it
that.
because I can release my little quandaries over this, that, and the other,
Hmm.
um, which itself is a steal from you. This, that, and the other.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, this, that, and the other is
Hmm.
your hallmark saying when we're in
Do,
conversation. When you
do I
want,
say it? Do I say it that
yeah,
often?
you in conversation for years
Wow.
would say this, that, and the other as um, accentuation on a recap of what you were saying
Yeah,
prior.
kind of as a catch-all.
Now, as a catch-all. Now, my saying, and I never told you this because there's too much that goes unsaid. Because if you know the way things go with us, we
Hmm.
get lost in
Yeah, we
quartersley.
do.
But I'm using it now, or I'm saying it, sharing it now. You usually say this, that, and the other to do that catch-all thing.
Hmm.
I usually say this, and that. So
Now
I'll
I've
say,
heard that. I've heard that too.
well, yeah, you probably heard it from me in that
Well, no,
fashion.
I've heard it in other places as well. I've heard
No,
it
no,
around.
let me say.
Hmm.
Well, maybe you have. Oh, I'm not doubting it. What I'm saying is that I haven't,
Hmm.
or maybe I have and I don't know, and I just incorporated it into my speech.
Hmm.
But here's the bit. I say this, and that
Hmm.
to mean the same thing as this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I say mine because that's what naturally comes out. You say
Hmm.
yours because that's
It's
what
what
naturally
comes
comes
on.
out.
Yeah.
But now here's the thing. Thinking on it, because I have, you have no idea because you're not in my brain. But little things like that, I just pick up, and they just keep churning there. And
Hmm.
how does that? Why is that happening? And stuff. It's nothing, but
Hmm.
who can control things inside the head? Who can control things inside the head?
Yeah,
um,
really.
but here's the bit about that, and I hate to say it because I would love for mine to be the special outstanding one, but I concluded somewhere down the line recently, although it's been mulling for years, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
and I'm telling you now in our conversations for years, and I never. It's better. I mean, you could have creative license, but it's more reasonable. Let's say reasonable to say this, that, and the other as opposed to this, and that, if you really look at it, because this, and that is two this is following each other. And I guess you could do that by adding, the comma, but this, that, well, you could argue this, that, and the other. No, it's fine. So this, that, and the other makes more
Well,
linguistic sense in a neat fashion. But wait. Let me round this up. Let me round this up. I'm gonna finish it right
okay.
now, and you're gonna like it, or maybe you won't. But the other day, or a few days ago, I used, without thinking about it, used yours instead of mine that I usually. No, get this. Wait, get this.
I'm rubbing off on you.
No, get this. Here's the bit. I said, yeah, this, that, and the other, Mark, or something like that in one of our previous. And you, a few sentences down the line, to recap yours, said, yeah, and this, and that. You said it.
Did I?
Yes. And because that switch off occurred,
Dude, that's freaking scary.
exactly. That's exactly the point. Anyways, that was what I wanted to say. Go ahead.
Well, you were saying that this, that, and the other made more sense, but I think it depends on the situation, because if you're talking about specific things, this, and that, that's a limit. That indicates that there's a limit. The other kind of leaves it open.
Yeah, but
Now,
you could say
to
this
get
and
even,
that and end
but
it there.
yes, you could, and that's even more restrictive.
Hmm.
Something else I've heard for in exchange for this, that, and the other is this, that, and the third. Now that's
Hmm.
really restrictive because that's only three things.
Yeah.
But I have heard that quite a bit, and I don't know if it's gaining popularity, but I've heard it more in the last 2 years than I have in the previous 60. So I don't know, is it new, or is it the new phrase, or what have you? I got one last one here. Um,
I had, by the way, I just want to say this one thing in between. Sorry. This that I just told you,
mhm.
which was brewing. I mean, it wasn't like I was sleeping uncomfortably at night over it, but it was something that I had recognized and sat in my head. And I said, damn, every time, but it was percolating. Every time Mark uses this, what I used, which is this, and that, Mark is using this, that, and the other. And I found it a curiosity, but then I caught myself saying your thing. And down the line, then you threw mine back at me, and I don't
And I
think,
didn't even realize I did it.
yeah, I don't think you did it. I don't think it was. It was just the natural flow. But
And
that,
that's what's scary about it, is it's that connections of the subconscious, and we switched.
yes, that's what's scary. But I think that. So anyways, this whole bit, I couldn't help but share it right now. But it
It's
was
funny.
the sideline of the main thing that I wanted to say, which this is actually more entertaining. But the main thing was that if you think about this whole wording thing that you're talking about,
Yeah.
and like the usage of it, and people maybe forgetting where it originated, and all these things, the intentions of it and stuff, and us trying to communicate with each other, and
Mhm.
bringing dictionaries over, all that we were talking about, about conversation. If you think of a Shakespeare,
Mhm.
the way he wrote, his intention was for the people of the time,
Yeah.
with no ability to um, account for what we're speaking today,
Right.
and just that idea. So this transformation thing, it was just something I wanted to
Yeah.
add. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, he was also writing in the early forms of modern English. So there were a lot of things that they used then that we don't use now. And in fact, Shakespeare's credited with inventing a big old long list of words that we use every day. But he basically invented them. A lot of them didn't catch on. Quite a few of them we still use today. I have one last one, and I will admit that I kind of looked for it to see when it began, but that is something being bad or just using it to mean too bad is bummer.
Bummer.
The
You
first time I heard it was on a Cheech and Chong album back in the early 70s. I want to say it was Big Bamboo, which came out in 72, but I may be wrong on that being that album. But the first time I heard it in that context was on that album. And I still use it. And I think that's one of them, kind of like Cool, that's here to stay. Because I don't care what age you are, if I say, what a bummer, you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a good one because the lettering
Mm-hmm.
with the two M's together,
Mm-hmm.
ending with the
Mm-hmm. It brings you down.
Yeah, it's a perfect tail
Mm-hmm.
end.
A little bit of onomatopoeia there.
I like it.
Yeah, I do too. And then, of course, that led to Bummed Out. You know,
Yeah, that
dude, I'm
insinuates.
bummed.
You know what that insinuates? Can you and I talk further?
You know, what,
Not
dude?
necessarily. Yeah, dude, I'm bummed out. Can we talk?
Dude, why you so bummed out? Man, it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
exactly.
day. Let's go. Get on
Yeah.
your bike. Let's ride. You know, that kind of thing.
Which is
And
followed by just get over it, pal.
mm-hmm.
which there's a lot there in that.
Ain't it funny how if one of our friends was kind of, I mean, he got in trouble or something like that, his dad yelled at him or something like that, and you could see he was all bummed out. Um, how therapeutic just jumping on your bike and riding somewhere was, because you can't. I'm 62 years old. I can't imagine getting on a bicycle when I was 8 and having a bad time.
I'm with you 100% on that one.
I don't know if it was possible for me to have a bad time if I was on my bike with or without a friend. Because usually, if I'm on my bike alone, I'm going to a friend's house or I'm coming home from a friend's house. So I don't know if it was possible for me in my youth to have a bad time on a bicycle. It was therapy, man.
The difference for me between riding bike then and riding bike now
Mm-hmm.
is significant. I've realized doing the bike riding that I have, and I
Mm-hmm.
haven't done so much lately.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm under 200
Sweet.
meters, which is unheard of for the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
I may not look well. You're only seeing my head, but
I can
my
see it in the
even
face.
my a little bit.
I can see it in the face.
It's been like 20 some odd pounds. And to be honest with you, I went gun ho in the beginning, but I've just been walking on occasion lately. But I never was a big eater necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm getting on a side note. The difference between riding bike then when I was a kid and now
Mm-hmm.
is that back then you'd see me on occasion even putting my feet on the handlebars, like roll with
Yeah,
my knees rolled up,
jumping off curbs and stuff.
jumping off curves, sliding the bike sideways. And now when a curve comes, I pucker and I take I crunch up and and I get um. But back then, I could have been launched from the thing. Wouldn't have been happy, but I would have just rolled, tucked, and continued. Now, it's I
Yeah, there could be papers to sign.
when there's a curve edging, Mark, to, and I'm going at a speed, I know I can make it up, but I know that once I hit that curve, there's gonna be a little moment of pain that I
Yeah,
have to struggle. Whereas before, so there's a difference.
yeah. I'm totally with you. Um, could you back at that in those days? Could you ever come off of a paved road onto a dirt road without locking up that back brake and fishtailing
No,
halfway around that corner? I think it was an unwritten law. You had to do that.
yeah,
And about half the time I stayed upright, the other half me and the bike would go in separate directions. But I didn't care. That was half of the fun. Dude, I wiped out. Did you see that? That was boss.
I can tell you one thing that you never experienced as a kid.
We'll
Right
see.
now,
We'll see.
and when I mean never, I am totally emphasizing never to such a degree that it's almost criminal. You never, while at a park or somewhere, as you were running, tripped and braced yourselves using the palms of your hands and scraped on tiny rocks, leaving scratch marks that were incredibly painful. Did that ever happen?
Not on pavement. Well, yes, on pavement.
No, not pavement. It could be rock or asphalt, but the point is that you slid with your hands.
Yes, yes. When we
And then you
first,
felt like little micro scratches on your hands.
dude, I lost skin.
Well, that's kind of more exaggerated, but
Yeah,
okay.
I lost skin. We moved back up to Oregon. I was 16 years old. And the first 3 months that we lived in this house, our road was dirt. And you had a paved road that came down the hill and flattened across our dirt road. Then you had another paved section that carried on back down the hill. Our house was built on the downhill slope. It faced uphill onto our street. The day they came along and finished paving our road, me, my brother, my cousin Billy got on our skateboards. We got up at the top of this hill. Did you ever on your skateboard do what they called a catamaran? Where you sit on your skateboard facing another guy on his skateboard and you crossed legs, interconnected your legs, and you went, down a hill sideways.
I wasn't that advanced with the skateboard.
We did a trimaran. It was my brother, my cousin Billy in the middle, then me on the outside. And we came down that hill and onto that level stretch of our road. Where our road met that uphill portion, there was a little bit of a dip, a little concrete dip area so water could run off down the ditch or down along the curb. We hit that. My brother's skateboard flexed. And when it came back up, it launched him off of the skateboard. When that happened, he fell off and started tumbling. My cousin fell off of his board because my brother was holding his legs. My cousin was holding my legs. And by the time we got down across my road, I hit asphalt and it took skin off of both palms. I mean, just all the way down, red.
Son of a.
Nasty. Then I landed and started rolling. I braced like this and started rolling. Right off of the pavement and down to all of the gravel that was on the pavement on the other stretch of road continuing downhill. And when you slide on gravel, it doesn't stay in place. It rolls with you and grinds you up. I had a GT stripe across my backside from hip to hip that was about that wide. That was the least of my problems because both palms were just basically meat. Oh man.
How long did that last?
Several weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were wrapped up in bandages and I had to put antiseptic on them and Neosporin ointment. And basically, they were wrapped up like, those leather gloves that don't have fingertips in them. I wore the white version of that, white cotton gauze version of that with first aid tape. My hands look like two, balloons.
Did it scab up?
No, it didn't do that. It basically, almost like if you get a big blister and that it pops and that flap of skin that comes off, that's basically what it was. So there was a thin layer of skin that was sore as hell.
Well, that's more dramatic than mine at the playground.
And the doctor said, we got to treat this like a burn because basically that's what's happened. You've opened up so much skin here. You're going to get infected if you don't do this. And so twice a day, I had to take all that wrapping off and wash my hands with this cleanser they gave me that turned it almost looked like mercurochrome, but not quite. and then put more antiseptic cream on it and this, that, and the other. It was for several weeks. Yeah, I beat this body up. Sometimes I'm surprised I'm alive.
Well, I just will say about to conclude all this,
Yeah.
at least so that's more dramatic by a lot. But I will say that anytime that I fell with the palms and got the scratches because it happened various times, it always ended up back then that to my bad luck that Farrah Fawcett would be doing her workouts in the evening, so it was just a bad combination. I had I
Yeah,
had I had that I had that one tucked away for
the poster. Yeah, I didn't have Farah. My brother was a Farah fanatic.
no, I didn't have Farrah. That whole that I just made a little
Yes,
connection there. So,
I
but
yeah, I get
go
you.
ahead, go ahead. I just say I didn't have Farrah Fawcett on the posters, but I did have Samantha Fox and so on and so forth.
Okay, okay. Yeah, my brother had Samantha Fox as well. Later on, many years after I'd moved out.
Bikini Girls, and just as an aside, because that was a big thing back.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on it.
Okay, so yeah, so I had Bikini Girls with Lamborghinis
Hmm.
or on motorcycles,
Motorcycles.
shameless,
Hmm.
sitting in bikinis on my wall,
Hmm.
shameless.
They knew what they were doing. Here's another one, real quick, before we land the plane. Go over to your buddy's house, dude. Why are you so bummed? My dad grounded me. What a drag.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
was another one I still use.
yeah, me too.
Oh man, that's a drag.
Yeah, did you know that my just as an addition, my family didn't understand the concept, or let me restate that the concept of grounding
Mm.
as such was unknown to them, which played a slight advantage, but it wasn't far removed from you can't go outside. But the the which you may think, well, it's the same thing.
Hmm.
Um, but the broader tradition of grounding in the United States was not something that they brought with them in
Hmm.
with a a a memory of traditional you're grounded things coming on TV and
Yeah.
in the movies and the grander thing. So I had a little bit of wiggle room, but not by much in terms of that, um, because the concept wasn't
Well,
something so enshrined.
my parents knew the ultimate way to get my attention was to keep me in the house and forbid me from going out and being with my friends. That was serious. A butt whipping you can get over in a few minutes. And grounding usually followed a butt whipping, but I deserved every butt whipping I got. I was a little butthole when I was a kid, but I think most kids are. They learned that limit that where they don't dare cross that one line. But yeah, I mean, I push that limit all the time. Um, so a butt whipping, and then you're grounded for a week. If it was serious, I was grounded to my room without the radio. And I didn't have a TV in my room, so I was there with books and magazines and hot rod magazines. I mean, till the cows come home.
My groundings were usually for the evening, and they'd forget all about it afterwards. Not that they'd forget, but it wasn't, again, at least from my perspective, looking back on it, um, it seems like the tradition of, yeah, he's doing time this month,
Yeah,
sure. That concept, although that's universal,
yeah.
um, whatever. There's some nuance there, but yeah.
Well, when you think about it, it's a lawsuit free form of going to jail. You know, there was no unlawful restraint there. Nope, you're grounded. You're not going out of the house. And for us, the minimum was a week.
Now with some of my friends, their parents um, were up to speed on certain. I mean, it's not like my mom wasn't. She went to school here and grew up here. My dad was older,
Dude.
but some of my friends parents being younger, perhaps, I don't know. I remember going over to the house and them being, you know, either Cuban or Hispanic or whatnot, and their mom sticking their head out and saying, "No, so and so can't play. He's grounded."
Yeah.
And it was like dun dun
Yeah.
dun,
Oh
and
no.
you'd get on the bike and
What
go
a
away, and
trap.
as you're
Yeah.
going away, you'd be like, "Oh crap,
Yeah.
he's doing hard time right now."
Depending upon the parents, because there was one friend of mine, Randy. I knocked on his door, see if he wanted to go out and do something. And he answered the door. And I, yo, man, you want to go out and do this? And about the time the word this came out of my mouth, his mom just appeared in the, because he had the door open just a little bit. His mom suddenly appeared right above his head, pulled the door back, one of those make you do this kind of things. And she said, he's grounded. He can't come out now. I went, okay, Mrs. Whatever. I don't even remember her name. And I turned around to walk away, and the door closed firmly. It didn't slam, but I heard her yell, I told you not to answer that door. He was grounded to the point to where he couldn't even answer the door. She was coming to answer it. He just got there before she did.
That's crazy.
And he told me about it later. Yeah, I got in trouble for answering the door when you knocked. I'm like, dude, I didn't make you answer the door. I mean, no, just I wasn't supposed to.
Every family has their particulars,
Mm-hmm.
and including rules and whatnot. So there's that too within the greater.
She was that one kind of person that when I was riding my bike away, I felt like I had gotten in trouble. You know, just one of those parents that make you feel like that. All I did was knock on the door and ask him if he wanted to go out and play. And she was like, no, he can't come out. He's grounded. And she'd go on. Then he turned around and walked in. And she watched me turn around and she closed the door firmly. But I felt like I got in trouble.
Um, so can I wrap up with the movie that I wanted to share?
Well,
It's just a suggestion of a movie.
okay, go ahead.
So the other night I came across the movie that to me looked, just from the image, and you
Mm-hmm.
know how I am about the Rolling Stones,
Mm-hmm.
not appealing.
Yeah.
But I opened it up and I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. Oh boy, what a movie! It's called entertain. Let's put it this way: from the moment it started to the end,
Mm-hmm.
they edited it and performed in it and orchestrated it in such a way I couldn't stop watching it. I wanted to know what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was that well done in my mind. It's called Lucy,
Oh,
and
Scarlett Johansson?
yeah,
Yes. Yes. I've not seen the whole thing, but I've seen parts of it enough to follow the story. I agree.
dude, go ahead.
It was a whoa movie.
Yeah, the movie is worth the price of admission.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just so well done. They use imagery in the beginning, um, to connect with like the original human being,
Mm-hmm.
ape-like type, whatnot, and then to modern times, this girl called Lucy. It's a quick little exchange, and it's all about expanding the mind. You get the, you know, the premise, right?
Yes.
There's a drug. She gets injected with it, unfortunately, because she's stowing it away, and it's supposed to do things, but she gets too much of it, and her mind starts to expand, where she gets to the point where she can see different angles, and just keeps, she just keeps learning more and more. And the thing about the movie to me was that, in a small way, with us and the internet and whatnot, the access to knowledge, it's kind of a detached form of what that movie represents. Where
Yeah.
today in society we've grown in the, at least the potential to be able to access any information, but in the movie it accentuates it and goes way crazier until she reaches like critical mass
Well,
in terms of
yeah.
knowledge.
Well, not only that, her mind is expanded to the point to where she can control things in the physical world.
Hmm.
So yeah, it makes that leap from mental capability to the physical world. N- Not unlike Carrie, but a completely different direction.
Well, in one point in the movie, and it's really a great movie, but in
Hmm.
one point of the movie, she reaches out to a very smart scientist, professor, etc.
Morgan Freeman, yeah.
Morgan Freeman plays the role, and this man is a genius that you know he led the fields of his trade, so he's a very brilliant guy. But by the time she gets to him to ask him questions, she kind of already knows more than him.
Yeah.
And as it progresses, her face and her interaction with the world around her, because of the amount of understanding that she's gathering, she can see um, and understand. She can no longer um, operate at their level, and she takes a Parisian cop along with her. And at one point, the cop says to her, "Well, you can stop frickin' people. You can make guns drop from people's hands at this point. Why do you need me around?" And she says, "You're a reminder. Come, let's go." And she's losing what she was,
She's losing her grip on humanity. She's
right?
losing her humanity. Yeah.
Because she's becoming all knowledgeable. So the whole thing is freaking great,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
it juxtaposes, some of the themes that I usually review in a different in a movie format, um, where there are things that are inaccessible to us because we're simply like some sort of,
Too limited. Yeah.
yeah, because something like maybe someone like astrophysicist or something um, has a door open to that we don't have access to, and maybe potentially would never have access to, even if we tried. I'm talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not that, oh, I want to learn how to paint, so I took a course and now I can paint flowers. You could do that more than often than not. I'm talking about getting out of hand, and I see the internet as a potential of that, even though it's detached from us. But who knows what the future would bring.
Nobody
Anyway,
knows.
I recommend the movie. It's really freaking brilliant.
Yeah. You can go on YouTube and you can find uh, trailers for it. You can find scene synopses for it. You can find all kinds of interesting things on it. It's the movie's called Lucy, and Scarlett Johansson is the star. And yeah, what he said, I concur 100%.
Yeah, it's got a nice um like Japanese or Chinese um, theme to it within it, because there's it's like Chinatown or something is somewhere in some sort of Manhattan area. But the point is that it has a nice combination of things, and it's gritty enough that it's and but intelligent enough. The two aren't mutually exclusive necessarily.
Well, no, but this is not a strictly button down intellectual type of a movie. It is an
Exactly.
action. It is an action film,
Totally.
and yeah. So I mean, there's something in there for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great movie. So, anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there
Okay,
as a
I
good
agree.
one.
I do agree.
Anything others before we land?
Nope. That's it for me. I mean, it's been a hell of a ride so far, and so we'll see where we go next year. Lord knows, because I sure don't.
And let's keep it that way.
All right.
Don't you
Stay
think?
spontaneous. Yeah. Stay
Well, yeah.
spontaneous.
All right. So listen, we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time, and we're the Trampled Underfoot podcast show on YouTube. Find us over on Facebook, same name. Find us at our website on the web, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and we're also sponsored by.
Harneal Media. I hit the wrong banner. That's the banner I was after. Harneal Media, your web solution. Look, it's just us here. It's a new year. It's a new week. It's a new day. Welcome to today. And today, you need to think seriously about a website. Now, I hear you. I hear you. What the heck do I need a website for? You would be amazed. If you have a product or service to offer to the general public, there's no better way to get your product and or service out there in front of as many eyes as you possibly can than with your own website. Yeah, you can go through third parties who are always going to ask for a commission. Well, but you can eliminate that middleman and you can handle the ordering process and you can handle the shipping process or you can handle the digital downloads yourself. A lot of it's automatic. Steve can help you do that. That's harneilmedia.com. He's the official sponsor of the Trampled Underfoot podcast.com. I'm proud to call him a friend. He's very, very competitively priced. And after a few months, you'll say, how does he do this for so cheap? I wasn't getting this kind of service out of my last webmaster. I don't know either. All I do know is there's a link to Harneil Media in every episode on this channel, and that's the only way it's ever going to be. Check him out, Harneil Media. That's HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot podcast.com.
All right. So, folks, everyone out there, enjoy your year, have fun, do the journey, take the walk through the paths that you want, and or pause along the way and break a leg.
I see what you did there. Go do that thing.
All right. See you guys.
Peace. Peace out.